I recently discovered Kristi Burke's channel. She's processing a lot of the contradictions in the Bible, and there are indeed contradictions in the Bible, and offering her take on them. She's doing some great work raising questions that need to be addressed. One of the things I realise is that I've had a lot of the same questions, and my faith has survived them. And so what I want to do is offer my understanding and the ideas that have helped me come to terms with those contradictions. I want to say a couple of things about this before I start. I really like what Kristi is doing. I'm not at all interested in condemning her or anybody who listens to her or listens to what she says. I don't believe anyone is going to hell for this. My vision of God, my view of God is bigger, more generous than many of the Christian churches that are particularly vocal in this sort of area. Having said that, to understand what I'm going to say, you have to accept that I assume the existence of God. I assume the existence of a spiritual world. All I'm saying is that it is possible to look at the Bible, look at the contradictions found in it, and retain your faith. So I want to present today three ideas. The first is appearance. In 2014, Australian police apprehended and arrested a man who was administering a pedophile forum on the dark web. Now you would think that they would close that forum down as soon as they discovered it. They didn't. What they did was they assumed his identity and continued to run that forum. And so for a number of years, the Australian police were operating a forum that allowed pedophiles to share pedophilic material. Now that's an interesting contradiction, isn't it? And if you discovered that without understanding the reason why, you would be rightly shocked. However, the reason for the police doing it was entirely understandable. That investigation has led to the arrest of a number of pedophiles and the rescuing of a number of their victims, including last year on the Gold Coast, a man who is now charged with over 1,600 offences. And this speaks to me of the first issue we have when we look at the Bible. So when we look at the God of the Bible, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that we see only what is on the surface, on the outside. We do not see the motivation. Isaiah chapter 55, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." In the first book of Samuel chapter 16, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." And John's Gospel chapter 3, "If I have told you earthly things and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things?" The second idea that helps me come to terms with the God of the Bible is a concept that Swedenborg calls accommodation. It's the idea that God speaks to us in our language. And look, the church looks at the Bible as God's self-revelation, God wishing to communicate something of himself to us. That's fair enough. What they fail to grasp is that in order to do so, God has to speak to us in a language we understand. He cannot express infinite and eternal realities to finite creatures. And there's so much about the culture in which we are bathed that if we hear God speaking outside of those cultural terms, we simply don't understand. So we talk about things like slavery, we talk about things like the position of women. These are culturally determined. And outside of those boundaries, we have a great deal of difficulty grasping what is being said. And indeed, were we to hear truths outside of those boundaries, we would quite often reject them. We talk about a loving God. One of the ways I might understand God as loving is to say that he loves me more than somebody else. That's a problem with my understanding. But if that's the only way I can hear God's love, then that is the way that I will receive what God says to me. The final concept that helps me understand the God of the Bible is projection, psychological projection. We are very good at asking why. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? And this is the basis of science. The problem is that there is one very important and almost universal exception to that questioning why. And it is when the answer is to do with my own behaviour. How many of us truly accept responsibility for our own situation and circumstances? How many of us truly grasp that when my marriage fails, something has to do with me? The same is true of many of the problems that we face. If things go wrong, we look for someone to blame other than me, and we see this happening in the Bible. So we go somewhere like Noah's Ark, this destruction that the Lord apparently wreaks on the world. The way Swedenborg writes about that is that it is actually a reflection of our own state of being and actually has nothing to do with God at all. We put it on God because we don't like the fact that it's our responsibility. We don't like the fact that we have brought it upon ourselves. Now you combine those three things together and we understand the God of the Bible in an entirely new way. So here's one last idea I'll throw in. The Bible, in speaking to us where we are, seeks to lead us on to something better. My favourite example is the ideas of revenge and forgiveness. You look at the beginning of the Bible, you look at the law of Moses, the idea we have very firmly is revenge. But we have in that a limiting of revenge, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, no more. We move on then to an idea of allowing the Lord to take revenge rather than taking it ourselves. So that's a step removed. And of course you go later into the Bible and we have, particularly in the gospel, the idea of forgiveness, that we need to not only let go of the action, but let go of the desire for harm to be done to the person who has harmed us. Luke chapter 15. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. This is an image of the Lord coming to us where we are in our understanding as it exists now, and then seeking to lead us on to something new and something better. Well done if you've made it this far. I'm very happy to take questions and comments. I certainly offer this in the spirit of conversation and not condemnation at all.